everyone, I'm Chirag and welcome to part 6 of the tutorial series on Amazon Textract. So guys, in this video we are going to cover one of the use case where we want to upload a file, and as a part of the response we want a backend to identify or detect key value pairs and the table information, and then draw the bounding box around that to highlight that information. So at the very high level we want to upload something like what you see on the left side of my screen, and as a part of the response we want to receive something like what you see on the right side of the screen. Okay, so here what you see in red and green are basically key value pairs, and what you see in blue color represents the table information, and what you see in the yellow bounding box are basically the cells in the table, which is highlighted by the blue color. Okay, so this is something that we want to achieve as a part of this video. So let's see how we can achieve this. So now to get started, as a next step, I will quickly take you through this workflow. That is something we are going to implement in this video. So here the user is going to upload a file, right? And as soon as user clicks on the submit button, this front end or whatever your front end functionality is, it's going to invoke the API endpoint, which is /upload, and it will also pass the file name as a part of the query string parameter. And this functionality will return the pre-signed URL to upload a file back to the front end, and as soon as this front end receives the pre-signed URL to upload a file, it's going to upload, for example, x.png using pre-signed URL to this S3 bucket or to the storage. Okay, now once the file is uploaded to the storage, it's going to trigger some sort of business logic, and once that business logic is applied to that file and the file is processed, right, it's going to store that processed file back to the storage. And while this workflow is in progress or is in process, this front end is again going to call the API endpoint, which is /download, and it will again pass the query string parameter, that is the file name, that is x.png in this case. And once this front end invokes this API endpoint, this backend logic is going to check if x.png is processed or not. If it is processed, then it's going to return the pre-signed URL to download that processed file to the front end. And once front end receives the pre-signed URL to download that file, it's going to download that file and display it something like this. Okay, so basically this is the overall flow that we are going to implement in this video. Okay, now let's have a look at the architecture diagram. So this is how the architecture diagram looks like. Again, we have a user and the sample user interface. User is going to upload a file, and this sample UI or the front end is going to call this Amazon API gateway. And as you can see, it will request pre-signed URL to upload a file, and this lambda function, which is basically the pre-signed URL generator, will return the pre-signed URL back to the sample UI. And once it receives the pre-signed URL to upload a file, it's going to upload a file to this S3 bucket using that pre-signed URL. Okay, and as soon as the file is uploaded to this Amazon S3 bucket, it's going to trigger another lambda function, which is basically responsible for applying OCR or to extract key value pairs and the table information from that image. And once that information is extracted using Amazon Textract, it's going to apply the bounding box around that information. Okay, and once that processing is done, it's going to store that processed image back to the Amazon S3. Okay, in the meantime, this sample UI or the front end is going to invoke this API gateway again, that is the different API endpoint, and it's going to request processed image or the processed file from this API endpoint, right? And this lambda function is going to check whether the uploaded file is processed or not within the S3 bucket. And if it finds out that the file is processed, then it's going to return the processed image pre-signed URL to download, okay, back to the sample UI or the front end. And once this front end receives the pre-signed URL to download that file, it's going to download that processed file and it's going to display it something like this. So now as a next step, we want to deploy these resources which are the part of this architecture diagram. Now to deploy this, I have already written the AWS CloudFormation template, as you can see on my screen. You can directly navigate to AWS CloudFormation template repository and look for Textract bounding box API.yaml file, and you should be able to find this CloudFormation template. So this template is nothing but the configuration about all these resources that you can see on my screen, right, that we want to deploy. So it's all in here, and this CloudFormation template will accept few parameters like code bucket name, then the lambda function code, right? So here we have basically 1, 2 and 3 lambda functions. So we need to provide the reference of the code for those lambda function. And apart from that, we are also using lambda layer. So basically, to draw the bounding box around each of the information or each of the key value pair and the table information, we are using OpenCV package. Okay, now OpenCV does not comes inbuilt into the lambda runtime, so that's the reason we also need to provide the reference for the OpenCV package, right? That is the zip file. So we can create the lambda layers and we can add that lambda layer into the lambda function and use OpenCV package there. Okay. Now, in case if you want to learn more about the CloudFormation template, then I have did a dedicated AWS CloudFormation tutorial series. So you can just navigate to my channel and click on playlist and just look for CloudFormation, right? So you should be able to find that in terms of CloudFormation template. Okay, and if you want to learn more about the lambda layers, that how you can deploy or use OpenCV package into the lambda function, then also I have did a separate tutorial on that as well, so you can refer that if you want. I can post the links of those videos in the video description. And apart from that, the additional functionality that we have is that the upload and download of the file using pre-signed URL. So again, I have covered both the functionality in the API Gateway tutorial series. Again, if you want, I can post the links of that videos in the video description, or you can simply go to my channel and click on playlist and look for Amazon API Gateway tutorial series, and you should be able to find these two videos, right? That how you can upload a file using pre-signed URL and how you can download a file using pre-signed URL as well. Okay, so I think most of the things we have already covered, and apart from that, we are using this lambda function to invoke Amazon Textract, which is basically the analyzed document. So again, that functionality we have already covered in one of the previous video, so you can refer that as well. Okay, so at the high level, this is nothing but the combination of all those videos we are just putting together into one CloudFormation template to achieve or implement one of the use case. Okay, so that is it. And then let's talk about the code part. So the code I have pushed to this repository, that is AWS tutorial code, and you can navigate to Textract directory. Within that, you would be able to see bounding box, key value tables. And here I have pushed the code for Flask application as well, that I have used as a part of the front end. Okay, and then here we have code for 3 lambda function and then the OpenCV lambda layer. So here I have the zip file, so you can directly use that. And now let's have a look at the pre-signed upload and download code. So here we have pre-signed -upload. This is the lambda function.py, right? So this is the very simple function that we have written. This basically generates the pre-signed URL to upload a file to specific bucket for the given prefix, and then it will return the create pre-signed URL or the pre-signed URL back to the Amazon API gateway and back to the front end. Okay. And similarly, we have the pre-signed download part, the another lambda function. So here again, it's simply creating the pre-signed URL to download a file if that file exists. Okay, so here we have covered one more thing, is that check if that particular file exists. Okay, so here we are checking if the processed file exists into the S3 bucket or not. And if the file exists, then only we are going to create the pre-signed URL for that, else we are going to return 404 file is being processed. Okay, so that front end is going to reinvoke that API endpoint and maybe 2 or 3 seconds again. Okay, so this is the pre-signed download part. And finally, we have one more, that is image processing. So here we have basically covered the invocation of the Textract method, that is analyzed document, which basically returns the key value pairs and the table information. Okay, and if you remember, then in I think part 2 or part 3 of this tutorial series, I have taken you through the typical response, right? That how the response looks like, and which items or which parameters that response contain. And if you remember, then I had also covered the bounding box and the geometry information, right? So that information we have used to basically draw the bounding box around that image to identify or highlight the key value pairs and the table information. And here, apart from that, I have this helper.py file where I have written the helper functions. Let's quickly have a look at it. So here within helper folder, we have helper.py. So this is the typical error processing function. This is the upload to S3 function, and then we have the function for drawing bounding box. Okay, so this is again the helper function to get width and the height, okay, of the image. And then this is the function that we are calling into the lambda function dot py, and it it basically accepts three parameters, that is response that we are receiving from the Amazon Textract, then the s3, then the bucket name and the file name. So this s3 is basically the boto3 object. Okay, and finally we are looping through that response, okay, to extract the key value pairs, right, and the information for geometry and the bounding box of that particular block. And then we are also extracting the information for the table, block type table, right, and then again we are extracting that geometry and the bounding box information. Okay, and in turn it's going to call the draw bounding box method to basically draw that bounding box around key value pairs and the table information. Okay, and similarly for cells which are basically highlighted in the yellow color. So this is basically very high level of what the code looks like. Now, in order to use this code, what you need to do is you need to navigate to each of this directory, that is, for example, image processing. You need to select both this item and you need to compress it and give it some name. Okay. Similarly, for pre-signed download and the pre-signed upload, and this OpenCV is already in the compressed form, right? So you don't need to do anything over here. And once you prepare the zip file of all these directories, okay, you need to upload those zip files in one of the S3 buckets, as I have did here, as you can see on my screen. So here I have this reference bucket code and I have created a directory, that is bounding box, and within that directory I have uploaded this zip file. So this is for image processing lambda function, this is for pre-signed download function, this is for pre-signed upload function. Okay, so you need to prepare the zip file, because we are going to provide the reference of this code or the zip file while we start deploying the AWS CloudFormation template. Okay, now once this part is done, we will go back to the CloudFormation service. So navigate to AWS Management Console and look for CloudFormation and say create stack. Now here we are going to upload a template file because I have that file locally. So I'm going to say choose a file, and from here I'm going to select this template. I will say open, and once the template is uploaded, click on next, and here you need to provide the stack name. I will say bounding box, something like this. Okay, and then now we need to enter the parameters. So basically the first parameter is the code bucket name, so it's asking where is your lambda function code located. Okay, so my code is located into this reference bucket code, so I'm going to copy the name of the bucket and paste it over there. And then we have lambda layer, so it says enter s3 key reference for OpenCV layer, so we need to provide the reference for the OpenCV -39.zip package. Okay, so our OpenCV package is located in this directory within s3 bucket, and then we will say OpenCV-39.zip. Okay, similarly all the code reference is located in this directory, so I will simply copy and paste it over here. And then it's asking for the s3 key image process lambda, so key reference for image processing lambda, so it's going to be the image-processing.zip in my case. And then it's asking for the pre-signed download lambda, so it's over here, copy, paste, and finally the reference for the upload lambda, so I will say copy and paste it over here, and then we will say next. Scroll down, click on next, scroll down, say I acknowledge, and say create stack. Now it will take some time to create all the resources, so let's wait. So now, as you can see on my screen, the resources are deployed successfully and the CloudFormation template is created successfully. Now if we look at the resources, then we should be able to find all the resources that this CloudFormation template has created. Okay, and apart from that, if we look in outputs, then we will have the API endpoint, and we are going to use this API endpoint to invoke different functionalities. Now apart from this, one thing I want to highlight is that we have basically used IAM authorization for this API endpoint. So let's quickly have a look at it as well. So here we have HTTP API. So let me sort by create date. So as you can see, this is the sample API that is created by the CloudFormation template. And if we look at the authorization, so here as you can see, both the resources are basically IAM authorization enabled. Okay, so in order to invoke this API endpoint successfully, we need to sign the request with Amazon access key and the secret key. Okay, so we will need those keys in order to successfully invoke this API endpoint. That is basically signature version 4 if I'm not wrong. Okay, so this is it. Now we can copy this invocation URL, and if you remember, then I had mentioned that I have used Flask application in order to invoke this API endpoint and display the images, right? So as a part of the front end application, so here under bounding box KV tables, I have this directory that is flask-app, and under that directory I have all the configuration and the code in order to run this application successfully. Okay, and then here I have this application.py file, and here I have a couple of methods defined. For example, the sign method. So as I mentioned, we need to sign this request in order to invoke it successfully, else it will return 403 forbidden if we don't sign this request. Okay, and then we have the helper function to call the /download API endpoint, right? And then we should be able to download the processed file. And then we have one more function, that is the index function, which is the main function. So what will happen if you look at the home.html under templates? So here I have this upload functionality. Okay, and once the file is uploaded and as soon as the user clicks on the submit button, it will invoke this index function right over here, that is on line number 17. So how it will invoke that function? So here within action we have defined that a call index function as soon as the submit button is being clicked. Okay, now once this function is invoked, it's going to create the temporary directory, that is static/temp directory, and then it will fetch the payload of the uploaded file and it's going to read that. And then I had also mentioned earlier that the front end will generate the unique file name, so we are using UUID to generate that, and then it's going to invoke the API endpoint right along with the file name that we have generated using UUID. And then on line 29 we are calling that API endpoint, and then it will return some response which would be a pre-signed URL if everything is configured perfectly fine. Okay, and then we will be using that pre-signed URL to upload that file, okay, that user has uploaded from the front end. Okay, and once the file is uploaded, it's going to call the download processed file method. Okay, so here we have the while loop and it's going to call this /download API endpoint, and this will check if the file is processed or not. And if the file is processed, okay, it's going to basically return the response.content. And as you can see on line 65, while we are invoking the get method, we are also calling the sign method. Okay, so basically we are signing this request. And then once the file is downloaded, it's going to display that file as a part of the front end, as we just saw in the initial part of the video. So this is the very high level and the rough flow that I have implemented using app.py. I will not go in much detail because this is not the Flask application tutorial. So maybe in your case you might be using the React.js or the AngularJS or anything else, right? But as of now I am using this Flask application. Okay, now before we move on, we need to configure a few things. So here I have this config.py where you need to set the environment variable for your access key ID and the secret key ID. And then finally, you need to also set the host and the endpoint. So let me set the host and the endpoint. So I will go back here, I will copy this. And then as a part of the endpoint, I'm going to say, this is my endpoint, and then host is going to be the same except for the stage name and the HTTPS. So remove this. Okay, so you can also set this as a part of the environment variable, and then you also require access key and the secret key in order to run this successfully. Okay, so I have that access key and the secret key as a part of the environment variable. Okay, so now I can execute unicorn free app colon app. Okay, and I will say enter. Oops, it should be unicorn. Okay, so here we are. I can simply copy this URL and go back to the browser, open a new tab and paste it over here, and I will say enter. Now as you can see here, we are going to click on choose a file, and then I'm going to say upload this sales invoice underscore lg.png. I will say open. So here you would be able to see the preview, and I will say submit, and it will take a while to display the information on the right side. So let's wait. So as you can see here, we have all the information, that is key value pair and the table information, that is being displayed as a part of this response. Okay, let's try with one more file. Let me click on choose a file. So here I will upload the sample receipt.png, this one. I will say open, and I will say submit. So as you can see here, we have the information along with the bounding box, right? So here we have key value pair highlighted in red and green, and the table information is highlighted in the blue color, and the cell information about that table is highlighted in the yellow color. Okay, so this is how it looks like. So guys, this is how you can implement this use case if you want to have the bounding box, if you want to highlight certain information using OpenCV and the Amazon Textract for some receipt or some forms, right? Then you can use this. Okay, I have posted the code in this repository, so you can reuse that as well. And same for the CloudFormation template. I hope you found this video helpful. So guys, that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Until that time, if you want me to do tutorial on any use case or service, then please leave them below, and I will try my best to come up with a tutorial as soon as possible. And if you have any queries or comments, then again please leave them below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.